All right, let's take a break from binging Dorohedoro and do a Patreon Q&A thing. All right, so this is the occasional every 10 episodes public episode of the Patreon Q&A questions for Patreon thing. So if you want to see the other 9 episodes for every one of these that's free, then you can go to patreon.com/SebastianSB, link in the description. And any pledge amount gives you a bunch of these things. They're just sort of chill, slow-paced, me hanging out and talking about things. This time, I figured what we could do is another departure from format. In the last free episode, we did the map drawing thing, which was fun, but a bigger ask than expected, a big time-consuming thing. I thought I was going to do the whole game, and I did like 4 locations. This time, I'm just going to run through me making thumbnails. But then the question was, like, when is the best day to make thumbnails? Do I procrastinate on making a bunch of thumbnails to make one big marathon episode? And I realized, like, I can just make a bunch of separate recordings throughout the week and piece them together, and whatever duration that turns out to be is what it turns out to be. So that's just what I'm going to do. So if my voice changes and my, like, energy level changes and there's skips and whatnot, it's because I've probably recorded this over the course of, like, 4 days or something like that. I haven't planned it that far ahead. But I'm just gonna sit here and make thumbnails and run through that process a little bit. We're gonna start off with a really easy one. I can look at the format of this mess though. So this is the Overwatch template right here, and there's a lot going on because at some point I used to have it so that every Overwatch thumbnail was just Tracer over and over again, because that was just how I handled most games, is you just show a character, but. And in general, it's kind of important to have a visible face in the thumbnail, like that draws people towards it. I think that's also part of why it's helpful to have faces in the sidebar and everything, but having a face and a logo, just make it be very readable, is helpful, because people are drawn to faces. So you'll notice that I put a face in every thumbnail as much as I can, as long as it's even vaguely relevant. Let's go into incognito mode so I can show you guys. I say incognito mode because if I go out of incognito mode, then this page gets fucked up. There we go. It's hard to explain, but this doesn't show up like this if I'm not in incognito mode. It shows up in a crazy order because I'm logged into the profile. It's weird. It's really weird. Like, see, nice big close-up on Ellie here. You have Chris and Sheva here. You have Pac-Man. Like, every single one has a face zoomed in as like a focus in one way or another. You got 2 people here, like human figures or something. Unless it's just completely unapplicable. Like these characters, these 2 games right here, which funnily enough I made like the same thumbnail for both of those games. There just weren't really any human faces to use as far as I was aware. Same thing with Inside the Box. So these 3 are actually the 3 exceptions in a row. Like here I used Katamari Damacy reroll, and I put this guy here, and that was just like the image that was there by default, but I put the logo over that, and then to add more face, I added the King of Cosmos in there afterwards as a separate stand-in. And I like to go for readability, because it was something really important to notice about this is how small all of these pictures are. So then when you go to this guy, every time I make a thumbnail, I want to zoom in to like that size, zoom out to that size. And then that's my reference point for whether or not the thumbnail is good. Because it's like, wow, what a beautiful painting. And then you shrink it down and you can't see a single thing. So yeah, every single time I make a thumbnail, you want to have relatively low numbers of details. You want it to be relatively clean. Because when it's small, you still want the readability of like the face and the avatar and so on. My Overwatch thumbnails can be a bit sloppy, but that's because there's like 20 variations of them. So this is generally the general goal, and how much time I spend on thumbnails is highly variable. Like this Charlie Murder thumbnail, I just found a banner image and then I'm like, done, print, and I didn't do anything else. But some of these other ones I put a lot more time into, like The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima. I found a nice solid image, but then I placed the logo manually and changed the size of it and so on, in order to make that readable and so on. That's also true for Cabela here, where normally the logo is under the bear, which doesn't fit in the range. So I crop out the logo manually and change the size of it for readability, and frame it on a part of the face where it doesn't block the claw or the mouth or the eyes, because that's where like the action is in the thumbnail. And you want to keep an eye out for this time code down here. Like, it's okay if it kind of slightly obscures something, like Never Dead here, if you can still read it clearly. But if you want something to be readable, you don't want anything to be hidden in the bottom right corner. It's preferable to have this kind of setup in many cases where the logo's on the top or the left, and then the bottom right corner is kind of an empty space. Like in the case of Last of Us here, it's literally an empty space, and Dragon Quest Builders, it's empty. In Overwatch, you can still read Overwatch. And then in these Pac-Man guys, I put him in the corner, and then here, like a popular template I use for RPGs that I put my custom character here on the right and the logo in the middle, and then so like the chest of my custom character has a little timestamp in the way a little bit, but that's about it. Wow, there's 4 of these in a row. 4 Let's Tries in a row had no visible characters to show. That's funny. I just realized Vane is also here. So it's just a logo and like a picture of like the Vane and the bird, which is kind of something, but yeah. But these two, you can still see a fixate. This one's probably one of my worst thumbnails just because I didn't have necessarily a ton to work with at the time. But these three all at least give you, these three give you a clear thing to focus on at least, even if it's not a person. Like there's that brain box, it's a retainer that looks like a butterfly. Like that thing trips me out. And then this tree house and so on. There's some details to keep an eye out for there, but you can see I'm pretty consistent about the faces. Like there's a lot of things you could use in the Surge too, but I specifically used this girl, Athena. Her name is Athena, right? Who's not a very frequently seen character in that game necessarily, although she is important to it. But the alternatives were a bunch of robot dudes that look like fucking Transformers, and like once you put them on a thumbnail, they're so noisy and busy looking that they're like, you cannot get a good image to look at for your thumbnails purposes. My Let's Tries seem to be a consistent exception to my rule, funnily enough, looking at here. Neon Noodles doesn't feature a person. Sludge Life is kind of a person. Battlestar Galactica Deadlock does not feature a person. In these two cases, Neon Noodles and Battlestar, there just wasn't people in the available materials for those games. So like they're kind of a funny, consistent exception to my rule. Sludge Life, I could have used like the Flyman or whatever, but honestly, I think I was just lazy. I saw this banner and I was like, that's such an easy, clean image to use for my thumbnail. I'll just go with that. Like Dusk. Dusk was a weird one. I had this picture, but I just need to manually crop the entire Scarecrow man so I could make him brighter so he would stand out against the background. Duskers also doesn't have people in it. Oh, that's a funny coincidence. But see, I made up with it with Overcooked, which is full of people. 4 different people for one video. And yeah, that's the general gist of things. You can see a template here, like Neversong, Dandara, Spirit of the North. Like, try to crop a character and frame them well within the space given, and then make a clean logo that can be read at multiple sizes. And as you can see, the rules go all over the place for my Overwatch videos. This one's just a block of text, because I was like, I'm going to try to bring people in with the names of all the custom games being played in this, even if it makes the thumbnail kind of look like garbage. But then you have like Anna here, and so on. Just kind of, that's just the general rule. You can see you can see the general trend is faces, and that's just helpful. That's just the idea. Some of these I'm not entirely happy with, like Bard's Tale. It's a nice looking thumbnail, but it's chaotic and low contrast, and the characters are kind of far away. You definitely can see what's happening pretty clearly. It's just not that eye-catchy. I'll definitely worry more about series thumbnails than Let's Try thumbnails, just because the series is going to be there for like 50 episodes. So like Iron Danger is also kind of low contrast and far away. So they're not my favorites. The Jet Force Gemini thumbnail went through like multiple fucking iterations. Let's see. Archive Jet. Did I keep the old version? Oh yeah, I did. I did keep the old one around. And the new one. So this was the first version of the thumbnail, and I'm like, okay, you got the 3 people, but like it's not great. The assets you're working with are kind of iffy, and then you zoom out, and it's just kind of like it's kind of noise. It's kind of hard to make out once it's small for like a phone screen or just general, you know, for thumbnails. The thumbnails are thumbnails. So I ended up going with this one eventually. Now it's just the finale is there instead of the original logo, but you get the idea. Like we went from tiny, hard to see people to better contrast. You have like they're blue, so I used like the orange background and that usual trend, and just tried to make them stand out any more because this one was just so much harder to make out at small sizes, or at least that was my takeaway. Anyway, when it comes to actually, let's get rid of this window. That's enough examples of stuff. So the question there's two questions. This is an easy thumbnails as far as thumbnails go, in part because I've already done all the work. One thing is that we just have all of these fucking faces. There's so many faces. So many faces. Let's see. I just keep them all on hand. So there's Bird, Lava Lane, Stainless, Brian, Andrew, Purple Phantom, Durf, Carl, Effie, Colonel, Marty, me, and Playboy Artie from that time. Let's do, so this one's, I think this one's gonna have me, Bird, Marty, and Andrew, but we'll double check over the course of the video, and they'll be placed accordingly. So there's the main things I need to figure out whenever I make an Overwatch thumbnail is what's going on in the sidebar, and what's going on here. So who's in the video, because that's just informative, and I just like that detail in my multiplayer videos if I can. And then what do I do here? What do I want to communicate? Is it a custom thing, or is there other stuff going on? Let's see. My Overwatch folder is fucking chaos at this point. Like, these are past thumbnails. There's my episode 200. I made the number really big and stupid because it's like my first time hitting 200 in a series, I think. Like, a lot of these are just a lot of these are just characters. Then you have, like, specifically, I'm like, season 23 has begun. I'm gonna put season 23 in the thumbnail, but also tank placements, support placements, damage placements, and each one has, like, a character I was playing a lot during the placement matches to communicate that it's somewhat of a special event video. Then you kind of recede into just saying season 23. I think specifically they're called season 23 because in these videos I do play competitive for some chunk of the video, as opposed to ones where I just play like mystery heroes or whatever. Here's the experimental one. This was a temporary thumbnail, which is why it says question mark question mark. Sometimes I upload Overwatch videos out of order because I want to put the new timely one out immediately, but I have like 2 weeks worth of backlogged videos, and I don't want to put those out. And then I don't want to like wait for all those to come out and then put out the one that's like timely and relevant, like the ones where like it's a new character or whatever, and then have it be super irrelevant when it finally comes out. So there's a special event like this weird one where they did 3-2-1 where there was 3 DPS and 1 tank. I was like, let's do this, and this is actually just the Moira experimental card, but just kind of carefully cropped and zoomed in. And I basically had, because of this, the frame of it doesn't work well, I had to basically custom create the background based on what the background of the tile looks like, because the proportions of the tile weren't correct. And there's like a lot of details here that don't look great. But the important thing to remember usually is that it's a thumbnail, and the moment you zoom out, all those tiny messy details mostly go away, and so I take solace in that. These are not graphic design projects. As far as my background goes, I did take a few graphic design classes, but never majored in anything in that field at all. But the exposure to Photoshop and whatnot definitely came in handy a bit. But pretty much everything else I do, I'm just self-taught. So if you're a bit of a snob in these fields, you might be frustrated by some choices I make or my lack of awareness of hotkeys or this and that thing, but I'm pretty much making this up as I go along. But for one of my go-tos is I always want an outline around things, so I use the drop shadow around characters and logos a fair amount so that when you zoom out, it stands out against the background. It always looks better the moment you zoom out a little bit. When you're at normal resolution, it looks kind of weird in a number of images. But in cases like this, I would upload it with a question mark part number, and then weeks later, when the playthrough finally caught up with that episode, I would then change that episode number to be the correct number and put it in the right part of the playlist, and then move on from there. And then people are like, what? And then when that happens, people get confused in a different way, where they're like, wasn't last episode 104? Why is this one 106? And it's like, well, because this one became 105 in retrospect, and so on. There's no clean fixes for these things necessarily. Was I gonna say anything else about this? There's a lot of Overwatch thumbnails. I have like several different folders. Was this one? Oh yeah, this is just a different variation of that, where there was no number at first, and then later on there would be a number. I thought there was going to be more. I made this as my template for experimental, but because I thought we'd make more experimental videos, but we haven't necessarily. Experimental hasn't necessarily ever been as interesting as it was during 3-2-1. Although last week they did a 2CP experimental that would have been interesting, but I just missed it. They come and go in 1 week, and if you often only play on the weekend, then that's rough. Are these the old ones? Why does it say old? Oh wait, no, sorry. Yeah. I tend to keep all my thumbnails for some reason, maybe because their file sizes are so small, but because we're at 200 and whatnot, I only have the most recent ones in the master folder, and then just throw everything else into old, because there will just be so many thumbnails. So I actually have the full archive. If I want to make like some kind of weird grid or whatnot, I can go through the full gist of how they all were. But the whole thing is just like the sidebar shows who I was playing with, and the thumbnail shows either what mode we were playing or what character I was playing as, and there's just tons of variations. And every time I had to make a new one, this was basically me making a new thumbnail each time. Some of them are easy. Like that's just a picture of Orisa you can just get on the internet, and it's official art. It's not fan art or anything. I have to be careful that I don't accidentally use fan art and I use official stuff, so I try to trace the source. And then I just frame it well, and it's like, all right, cool, that's thumbnail's done. But like stuff like this, I'm like, okay, that's the pose I want, but the background looks like shit. So I then found like the template, I found the image for like Reaper's like organization in the lore, and I hit that logo behind him, and then that made it look kind of better, although it is kind of off center in certain ways, but yeah. I think this was a picture of a victory screen I was able to just nab. So like, it varies a bit. The resolutions also vary a bit, but it's always worth mentioning that that's harder to notice the moment you're at the resolution that thumbnails are at. So being picky often does not pay off. But you can definitely see my general approach here is I just try to get an image for every single character that does this, where it frames well against the background, and it's just well set up. There's some really chunky thumbnails, but they always, yeah, they look better than when you zoom out. So I put a lot of time into the Overwatch thumbnails. Wow, Widow was once in a thumbnail. Forgot about that. But yeah, basically every time I decide, oh, this character has to be the one on the thumbnail this time, and I haven't done that before, I essentially have to make a new thumbnail, like we're doing a Let's Try or whatnot. And same thing goes for like Junkenstein here, and all these different modes. Whenever I decide to make the thumbnail be about the mode that I'm playing. I think this one's ooh, there's an error in this thumbnail. Is that still there in the current version of this thumbnail? Have I fixed that since then? What happened here is I wanted Zarya to fit better in the thumbnail, and she was just standing straight up, obviously, so I rotated her sideways, because that way she would fit. I think it was so that her arms and stuff, so on, would be above the logo and framed within this space, so I tilted it slightly. And you can see the top of the fucking thumbnail over there. The top of the image I used ends before the thumbnail does. I think this is technically a picture of the toy. So it's like waxy looking. And then I started getting different templates, where I was like, I'm gonna do double hero templates. There's been so many fucking iterations of how we do this. Different fucking modes. My god, there's been so many thumbnails. This is a great thumbnail image. When I found that one, it's like, that works so well. I think I've mostly retired these guys. They're kind of a huge pain in the ass, and I wasn't necessarily happy with them, but I just kind of, for some reason, decided that was the template for competitive thumbnails, was to show like our team makeup. Like there was usually people we were maining as. Like in this case, I was Moira, Effie was Sigma, and Andrew was Doomfist, but it would vary over the course of the video, but those would like be the ones that we fixated on. There's a lot of thumbnails of Sigma, Baptiste, McCree, because Andrew plays a lot of McCree, and Effie plays a lot of Sigma. Then you can see it switching between Moira and Baptiste for me. This was when I was bronze damage for a bit, where I was just Satan for a while, and like, how dare you put me in bronze? I'm gonna terrorize this community now. I don't know. We're spending way more time on Overwatch thumbnails than I expected, but that's this entire show. Spoilers. If you get to watch the full version of the show, every single fucking thing is me spending too much time all the time. All right, so first pass. And okay, so we have me, Andrew, Birdcatcher. This is my first pass of the video, where I just try to confirm who's in it real quick. I think that Moira avatar up there is... Oh, we're playing Mystery Heroes, that's unhelpful. I'm pretty sure that's Marty. It's helpful that this was this weekend's videos. Yep, Mad Cat, so that's Marty. I believe those are the only people we played with this weekend. I don't think Effie or Colonel or Brian joined us this weekend. So the fact that I'm editing this fresh after the weekend's over helps my memory stay straight. So I don't have to be that thorough with this pass. I'm pretty sure I know how this whole thing played out, which is that we had our... on our first day, we played half the day with... is that really Bird's avatar? Is the Anubis thing? Maybe? Yeah, I guess so. So I played with Bird and Andrew first, and then right when Bird left, and Marty joined, and then the last third of the video is actually the second day. It was because the first more than half is Friday, then the last part's Saturday, where I'm playing comp with Andrew to get my healing rank up, which went pretty well, but I'm not going to do too much spoiler on that. So at that point, we can pretty confidently just say these are the characters that I want to use in the thumbnail. Andrew tends to be the second person, both because he's frequently in a lot of these things, but also because our characters' heads fit together well. Bird is awkward because he's a big, long avatar, so I'm going to put him down here. He pretty much always has to be on the left side, so in this alternating pattern, he needs to be on the left so he doesn't stick out like crazy and look weird. If he's on the left, he has the space here. So this tends to be how this pattern works out when these people are involved. That's why people like Bird, Effie, and Colonel are often at the bottom of the thumbnail. It's not any kind of hierarchy thing necessarily, it's just they have the more awkward shaped avatars. Because Colonel's this big dice, Effie's this weird crazy skull shape, Durf is a logo, that's just a name that sticks out like Bird's name does, and Brian is also a horizontal controller thing. A lot of people have crazy, difficult avatars, so all these cartoon heads tend to be on top for, if no other reason than just because of that. This is episode 211. We just want to update the number real quick. And then comes the choice of what character to pick for the overall presentation thing. So in this early part, I'm playing a lot of Symmetra and some Junkrat with Bird, and I'm just kind of practicing DPS characters and having some fun. In the second part, we're playing Mystery Heroes with Marty, which is incredibly unhelpful for choosing like a dominant character, which is why I often will use that's why I made the custom avatar that just expresses, this is the Mystery Heroes thing. But that's not great either. But the real dominant narrative of this episode is that once the last third kicks in, I am Moira every single round, doing this big ranked climb with Andrew for a few hours. So every single round I'm Moira, and so like for me that's the dominant thing of this entire episode, is that this is season 23 because we play comp in it. I'm going to want to put the characters Moira. They're all just in these organized folders at this point, because I have to have a system if I'm going to be able to make all these avatars. But to run through them, we've got the we got Archives, Junkenstein, CTF Blitz, No Limits, Hero Gauntlet, Low Gravity, Lucio Ball, Mystery Heroes. And just whenever I add a new thing, I try to just add it to the applicable folder and then name that, then sort them alphabetically so I can get through them all. So like this top bar is just the time code as a reference to like, this is where the time code goes, because I have that in the thumbnail to help me out. This sidebar thing is like, there's the number, there's all of the heads, here's the banner side thing and the little shadow behind it and details like that. The other versions of me are here, like me wearing Andrew as a shirt and shit like that. These distressing details. Like all the heads are in this particular folder here. And all the characters are here. So I can quickly switch to like Anna or Bastion or Diva and then export the thing. I think I might have everyone now, but this took like months of new thumbnails. Funny enough, this one over here, Tracer, it's hard to make out, but let's say I'll disable the sidebar here. Yeah. This is just the original thumbnail I had for Tracer. The logos and stuff are in the way because I didn't disable them. When it came time to make a Tracer thumbnail, I just used the original thumbnail I was using for this series and just like plastered over that essentially, and that became the Tracer thumbnail. I'll probably have to fix it again because that's not what my logo looks like for the game. It doesn't overlap anymore. So if I ever actually have to make a Tracer thumbnail, I'll probably have to fix this and make a new one. But sometimes I will lazily make a new series thumbnail by using like an old Let's Try thumbnail and just throwing it on. And then here is because my character's head will stick out into the thing normally on the sidebar, so I have to like clone tool it away, which looks like this, where you choose a selection spot and then you can like paint over it. Oops, I'm on the wrong I was on the right layer, but you can choose a local area and paint over it. It's control click and then and you can just paint with respect to that, and then if you go too far you get this distressing clone effect where you can start delving into the thing you don't want to do as opposed to the background. But that's how I quickly get rid of my own head in these situations. This is tangent upon tangent today. This video is going to be monstrously long, and everyone who wants information from it's going to give up, and it will serve no purpose. That's who I am. So anyway, that was a half an hour of preamble around what was essentially 30 seconds of work. All I had to do was set the 4 people, be like, yeah, Moira season 23, 211. Just export that shit. But it was really just, it was set up. I was just explaining the mess that this is my most complicated thumbnail template file in all of my history of making videos, just because I went fucking crazy and decided to make basically often not fully unique, like if you watch like Salty Fish or any kind of like Overwatch channel, they make a brand new thumbnail every single video, and they seem to use like, I don't know, Source Filmmaker or something to like make posed characters and shit like that, or commission for custom art every single time. I don't have that money and time, and that's for people that make one video per day or one video every few days or one video a week. But this is definitely like, this file can definitely like just chunk out like on the fly, ignoring the sidebar entirely, just with the other things. There's like 50 unique thumbnails built into this one file at this point. It's a lot. Alright, next up, Fall Guys. Fall Guys while I take a drink. This is going to be making a thumbnail from scratch, but only almost from scratch, because that's how we do. Whenever I make a new thumbnail, I copy-paste the GIMP file, which is the software I use. I copy and paste the template I have into a new folder, and I name it the new game. And then I have to I have to fucking scrape out all the brains and shit, and use what's left over. And in this case, so it says Fall Guys up here, but it still has all the Overwatch shit, but that's fine. Right-click on characters, delete. Right-click on modes, delete. Logos, delete. Get rid of all this shit. And then we're pretty much good to go. and we'll just get rid of one of these text layers because there's too many. I already have this one sitting around. So if I want to edit text, I can just edit this one. It's often easier than starting from scratch, but not always when it comes to the text itself. And there's my little time code and my side heads. As far as the choice of which file I copy paste at the beginning of making a new thumbnail, it depends on which thing it is. If it's a Let's Try, I'll just open my Let's Try template, which I can actually go to here. Let's Try. There's a bunch of different Let's Try templates here. This is the Sad Games archive that I made recently. This one is my go-to usually for solo. This is my solo Let's Tries, basically. And so if I'm making a new Let's Try thumbnail, I'll just delete this shit and just put in the new assets and make my new thumbnail right here and then export it, because there's no reason to keep it all. But when you're making a series, you want to keep everything there and have it available so you can just sit there and just export the new numbers as you need it, or like the finale thumbnail once you know which episode the finale is, and so on and so forth. But for other ones, I either copy paste a solo playthrough or a multiplayer playthrough, and in Fall Guys' case, we want a multiplayer playthrough. Now, Fall Guys featured Bird and No Marty and Yes Colonel. It'll look vaguely like that. But one thing that happens is, in order to make it fit better, I decrease the font size of the numbers to 130. But we want to take it back to 150, which is my normal template, because we do not have a 3-digit number right now. We have a 2-digit number. And since we have a 2-digit number, we just don't need all that extra space right now. Let's see. But that leads to a problem where now I need to reorient my number. If I had copied pasted from a template that had less than 10 episodes, then I don't have to deal with this. But I want the Overwatch one because it makes things easier for me. So I'll just use another thumbnail I already have ready, and I'll just line it up with that, and that'll make it so that when you go from video to video on my profile page, the numbers don't just wander around vertically, except for when they change size to make them small enough to fit when they have 3 digits. But when they have 2 digits, I stick to 150 resolution, because that was just my starting point. Like, this was just my starting template for font size when I first made this style of thumbnail, and then I just made it smaller when it reached 3 digits because I didn't like how crowded it looks. I just kind of frame them all vertically so that they're like roughly overlapping to an equal extent, or they're all spaced out if there is the space, but there isn't here. So the heads are immediately done because I just have them all sitting here and ready at this point, which is nice. Now the big thing is I need to choose a fucking starting image. And that pretty much involves doing image searches and then seeing whether or not I like what I can get out of it. Now this is pretty chaotic. It's kind of a mess, so I'm not happy with it. As you can see, like, you get a nice good logo, but it's just a cloud of little things, and you don't necessarily even read them as being people. That's not entirely helpful. There'll be a moment of quiet here, because this is when I actually need to look for videos. I haven't looked for images, which is not necessarily something I want to do on camera, on my dominant recording screen, because you never know what the fuck's gonna come up when you do image searches. And I don't want to have to scrape through this video and potentially censor things. So this is a decent image. Bunch of characters, but specifically I could fixate on this chicken here, most likely. That's not bad. I want to make it smaller so that more of the chicken is in frame. Chicken is now mostly in frame. I might want to flip it. Made it a little too small. If I was being really finicky, I would undo my previous actions and then change it again from scratch, because technically if you make it smaller than bigger again, you've lost some resolution in the process, because you permanently reduce the quality when you make it smaller, and then when you make it bigger again, it kind of stays that way. Now we at least have a chicken. The words you say in this kind of business. Now we've got a chicken at least, so that's nice, I guess. I like my chicken. Oh, is that a nice clean logo I can use? The logos are a little weird. I usually have to download the logo to a local location and then drag that over. Oopsie. Did I save it to Let's Try Out of habit? Yes, I did. I just use that folder so much. If I copy paste it from the browser directly, I often end up with a black background. So we're already off to a decent start. I could go with that already, potentially. Ah, I'm on the wrong layer. If I make it a bit smaller, you can see the chicken a bit better. Whereas the logo has no lack of readability. The logo is exceptionally readable at this point. At that point, I could pretty much just stop there if I want to. One question is, how garish do I want the thumbnail colors to be? Because I can go fucking crazy. I can sample this logo color, which I often do, and paint the entire sidebar that color. Usually my text is white or black, just for readability's sake. Overwatch is kind of a special case where I made the background white and the number orange, because that shade of orange is from the Overwatch logo. And I always make the choice of whether to have the background shadow or not. I usually like it whenever there's any kind of chaos around here, whereas if it's a completely clean background, I might get rid of the shadow, but I find that in the early days I use the shadow less, but in more recent days I use it pretty much every single time. So I could go with that. We don't really need the time code as a reference anymore. That's a clearly empty space. So that one went pretty quickly. Right now, my primary temptation is the question of whether or not I want to have an outline around the chicken. But I think that the game is so bright and colorful that having a black outline around the chicken would look really distracting and weird, and it would stand out too much. So I think I might just be done already. More or less. Well, that was quick. Sometimes it's worth checking color, brightness and contrast, blip, edit levels, auto. Auto just slightly adjusts the balance, or dramatically sometimes, depending on how contrasty it is already. And then undo, redo. Let's see, Control Z is undo, Control Y is redo. So it's like boop, 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 boop. I think I like it after the change. It essentially normalizes the color, it normalizes the contrast as far as I can tell. It makes the darkest part on the screen basically black, and it makes the lightest part of the screen basically white-ish. So it often stretches out the colors in between to increase the contrast a bit. And usually it makes things look a little bit better, but it can completely fuck the thumbnail if you're not careful. But it's fast and dirty, and it saves a lot of time. So that's another example. That's what happens when you do it to the layer that the logo's on. This is higher contrast, but this is the actual correct colors. So because the logo has so few colors, it's just these two colors and then the gradients from white to black in between them. It'll straight up change the color of everything on the screen. And so that's when you start that's when you start getting unintended outcomes. So it's just an outcome to check. At this point I would just export the thumbnail. I usually export 10 or 20 numbers, depending on how long I think the series is going to be going. And as the series goes on, like an RPG or something, I'll come in here every now and then and export the next 20 numbers. So those would be the thumbnails for the next 20 videos or whatever. And that pretty much works that way. This was a pretty easy one because they made a really easy, readable thumbnail logos for this game and everything. But I'll spare you the process of me exporting stuff. There are some more sophisticated editing software that you can use to automate this process. Whatever Andrew uses, he can just like run a script that exports all of the thumbnails. I don't think you can do that with GIMP, except unless you use like some crazy like modded installed stuff that you have to pay for and so on. And I've just never really bothered because the whole process of me exporting a bunch of stuff is pretty much just mindless things I can do while listening to like I'm pretty much I always have a backlog of stuff on YouTube to be getting through in like video essay and podcast form and whatnot. So to the point where like usually something's even open already, but just paused because I paused to work on something that I couldn't listen to it during. So I'll pretty much just hit play on something and then just like export thumbnails for like 2 minutes and then I'm caught back up, and it's just not really worth fixing. There's Fall Guys. Oop, it featured those people. I'll export those later. It's just not that important to do right now on camera. That's not what's interesting about this process. If any of it's interesting, I don't fucking know. But this is what I do. This is the shit I do off camera all the time. So what do we got later? We did Fall Guys, we did Overwatch. So one of the things we should probably do is Anachronox. So let's grab Ghost. So grab the Ghost of Tsushima thumbnail and rename it Anachronox. It's more or less the process. And then we gut it. It's just handy because it means that I have my whole sidebar and avatar just already set up. Oh, this was a bad idea though. I'm a fool. I really should have checked which one I was getting first. I didn't. I had to be careful because Phoenix Wright is a me and Stephanie playthrough. Monster Hunter World isn't me a solo me playthrough anymore either. So just specifically nab one that has that still has normal avatars left. I should just check first. Ooh, I've been a nasty boy lately. Let's just go into my archive then. I keep editing directly on the stuff lately, don't I? Look at all these fucking playthroughs I've had. Aren't there so many of them? So fucking many of them. Am I right that, yeah, it's 150. I didn't imagine this, did I? There we go. Pathologic is so... This is actually too old. It doesn't even have the time code anymore. This is... You can actually see that I switched thumbnails styles midway through this playthrough. And rewrote them and so on. That's a little too old. That was Pathologic 2. Onimusha should be safe. So prepared today. Onimusha's in the sweet spot where it has 4 different colored shirts for me to go through. Because I set that up at some point, but there's no time code. I'm talking this through, I'm realizing the smart thing to do is to, instead of doing this work every single time like I keep doing, I need to make one gutted template and put that on the master folder. I think I've done that before in past thumbnail styles and then just kind of like stopped doing that at some point. But I really should be doing that because it'd make this whole process so much easier. But I'm a fool. Alright, this one will work. It gives me some stuff to gut, but Silent Hill 3 gives me something to work with. This will be like that cooking video I did, where I'm gonna get insane levels of backseat gaming over my file management. It's like, joke's on you, you just left that comment the moment you saw the problem, but then like 20 minutes later I called out my own problem and I know what I did wrong. So, blah. Let's see. This is just a texture I put over the normal background. So we just bring up the normal background there. That's just a picture of her. And some drop shadows and whatnot. And the old logo. Okay. Now we have this. make you a normal color. Everything keeps putting on the other screen. A lot of software does not know how to handle too many screens. Anyway, that was a messy process. I'm usually better than that, but I've apparently been nasty and I've been overriding my shirt directly instead of making a new layer. Normally, because I used to have these 4 shirt colors pre-made, and then I guess at some point I started overriding them directly when I started making all those custom shirts. That became a trend for a while. I started like customizing the shirt space to be relevant to the game, and I started doing it so much, but then also like not saving it. It's one of the reasons why I have so many copies of everything around. So Anachronox, we're gonna be a dirty boy again. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, let's see. So if I go into the old Let's Tries, should be able to just do this. That's a pretty good thumbnail. That's a pretty good thumbnail. Because yeah, I did a Let's Try of Anachronox, so I pretty much just need to take the Let's Try thumbnail, lazily throw it into this, like you saw with the tracer thing earlier. We'll hide this background real quick. Gotta get rid of we gotta get rid of this. We gotta get rid of this mess. Disgusting. My disgusting. Get out of here, Avatar. This is what happens when you. Because I don't have the original Let's Try template of the Anachronox thing because like I had to custom make that from scratch. There we go. But now we're good. So you have to take the old thumbnail and edit it directly. And this was a this was a process. So that guy's face is available, and that logo is available, and that emblem is available, but not together. Let's see if I can find it. Anachronox banner. Ah, I just closed the entire window. That was a bad misclick. I did that thing where you slide your mouse around and it like drags on the corner of the screen. So that's probably what I started with. There's the Anachronox logo and there's the guy, but like the placement is not great for a thumbnail, because specifically a thumbnail is like 16:9 aspect ratio. I can just grow this to show the example. I can't just use the available image in the raw form, because if I put it behind in my template, it cuts off like this. Like Acronox. This is what it looks like if you just use it as the entire thumbnail without any sort of editing. You could almost make it fit. It almost works. But then I have the additional problem that I have this sidebar here, which like that makes my videos recognizable as being mine, having the face and the usual consistent thumbnail and everything. Something I learned to do really early on, and then you have a space for the number and everything. So like that, you just want all this. So I have an additional challenge, which is that a lot of images available in press kits or in public materials and whatnot are often okay for 16:9, but I need to additionally squish it more. So I need to figure out how to make that fit. And then additionally, I had to get the Anachronox symbol, which I'll just get any example of real quick. Bloop, bloop. Like that Anachronox symbol that exists in different forms in different places. I needed to get that to go in there too, just to try to fill in more space. Because as you can imagine, once I made this logo and this head work together, there's just a bunch of black space on the thumbnail. So I kind of did this mess, which I'm not amazingly proud of, but it looks all right. It looks all right. I think it somewhat predates my custom thumbnails, whereas nowadays I might be more tempted to include this logo on my shirt, but at this point it's taking up space here, and if I moved it down there, it'd be either a duplicate of the same icon, which would look bad, or I'd be back to the problem of there being a weird black space here that I want to fill with at least something. Like I left a lot of the space negative, so that you can clearly make out each detail, but having it just be empty would look kind of weird when it's just a flat black space for like a third of the thumbnail. And there's my little time code, so we're pretty good on it not blocking anything important. So we can just pretty much just fucking save that and cut and ship and move on with our lives. But that's an example of me having prepared materials already. That's Anachronox, Fall Guys, and Overwatch are all done. Ghost of Tsushima, all I do is iterate the numbers. Resident Evil, I just iterate the numbers. We've already made those thumbnails, but we have 3 Let's Tries to make thumbnails for. This will be my bulk. This will be the bulk of my work for today, for thumbnail creation. I've opened too many tabs. Oh, I didn't recognize it because it was in search mode. All right, so we're gonna go to my big scary Let's Try folder. My classic sad games things and my Let's Try things are in the same folder right now. They probably shouldn't be, because it just makes this folder chaotic. Although they do sort top to bottom, where these are Let's Tries and those are sad games playthroughs. Like there's Dino Run, Escape from Life Incorporated, Horus, Infiltrating the Airship, Inside the Box, Ruiner, Shank and Bake, Suicide of Rachel Foster, Jeff Keen's Unfortunate Spacemen. And then you get to the sad game stuff, which are often just the cover of the game, but the Bureau XCOM Declassified, Cabela, Charlie Murder, Hero Siege, Killer is Dead, Magus, Never is Dead. This one I just gave up. the images available for One Piece, blah blah, Unlimited, I think it's Unlimited World Red. This is a Japanese game thing in particular. The press materials are often a fucking cloud of colorful characters in a big chaotic image, and then the logo itself is also incredibly chaotic in many cases. Like anime stuff in particular and JRPGs are a huge pain in the ass. So in this case, I just gave up and put the cloud of characters where you can mostly see Luffy pretty well, and I just didn't even put the logo in. I was just like, fuck it. One Piece people will click on this, I guess. Whereas a lot of Western stuff is much more usable, but also it can be boringly template because there's a lot of just dudes standing with their backs to the camera, and then a logo is often just like what everything looks like. That's just how a lot of it do. But anyway, we've got Life Incorporated stuff. Delete, 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 delete. We're not here for any of that shit right now. I've totally been keeping Blasphemous here ever since I made that thumbnail, just in case. Because instead of doing what I do with the other stuff, I could just like drag this image I've made and just make that the background into the. I could just drag this into the template for the Blasphemous playthrough if I ever get around to it. That's happened a few times in the past, and sometimes it comes to something, and sometimes just after a few months or years or whatever, I delete that thing I'm holding on to and give up on it. Because that's how it do. But I'm like, instead of doing the whole thing I did with Anachronox just now, it'd be cleaner if I could just use this, which I already have made, and put that, and then just drag it into the template of the playthrough. So it's like it's hiding underneath the black background to be used one day or never, because, you know, it's just hard to get around to everything that you want to get around to. All right, so let's start with, I'm just gonna do Google searches. Let's start with Basingstoke. The person who requested this said that their family or they lived there at some point or something, I think. Oh yeah, when you search Basingstoke, you just get a city. Alright, so I have to add game. And they might make my job easy on me this time, or maybe not. It's hard to say. A prominently featured image for this game is this. This little shit. And it's like, ah, fuck, if I could make that work for my thumbnail, then that's what I look for a thumbnail. Like, got a nice logo there, we got a character, like, we're set. But the big problem here is the aspect ratio is completely fucked. Because it's a fucking Steam... It's a Steam thumbnail thing that's like... Blubbity bubbity 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 boo. This little shit is this guy right here. And that's just... On top of being very small, you get this image a lot when you look for images. Is you get the Steam banner, which is too small to use usually, but also it's so wide. It's even wider than 16 by 9 because it's a banner image, and so it's frustrating because you're like, ah, that character, that logo. If I can make that work for my thumbnail, then we're fucking golden. But that's gonna be hard. It's gonna be even harder with my sidebar. Now it's async. You want that guy in frame, and you want that. I'm thinking about it. I'm definitely wondering if I can make this work. If nothing else, I want a higher resolution one. Ooh. My prayers are answered. This is a significant... See, this one's instantly as big as my thumbnail, as opposed to that tiny Nightmare Steam one I just expanded. Shit, that pretty much solved my problem. Gotta make it a little bit bigger. That more or less works. The temptation would be to get more of this guy in frame and make the text fit this sign better, which might be a big ask. So let's duplicate the layer and let's get a little ambitious and try editing things a bit and see if we can get away with some stuff, because that could be interesting. So first thing we want to do, we'll use the magic selection tool, give it like a 50. Might be a little too much. That selects the sign's face. I might make some mistakes here just because I'm sitting here talking this through and it's distracting. So the Let's Player thing applies to all things when you try to do commentary. When it's not like a practiced, one of those like tutorial videos online where it's like, you already planned this all out or whatever. I'm genuinely making stuff up as I go along. Alright, so we can copy this to a new layer. So first I copied the original thing to a new layer, like right here, just so if I fuck up, I can revert to the original layer and just delete all my dumb shit I made and just not commit to it. Let's see. So by copying instead of cutting, I can now experiment with shrinking this, seeing if I can make it fit better. It wasn't really necessary for me to copy the background, although maybe it works better that way. Is it distracting? Let's try to center it vertically. And maybe go a little further right. There we go. There's more zombie in screen, and you can still read Basingstoke. Or however you pronounce the name of this town. It's still readable, but now it's not going off the screen, but we were able to get more of the zombie on screen. That's very readable. For me, the perfectionist in me, at least to the extent that we can allow while doing this, is now bothered by this, though. So then the question is, how do we want to handle that background? I'm gonna see if I can get away with doing a layer mask. A layer mask is interesting. It adds the second image here, for those that don't know, of this like black area and white area. And the white is the used area, and if you add black, like you can literally just take the color black and you just paint with it. You can delete that image there, but unlike normal deleting, you can then come back with white and you can bring it back too, which is interesting. So you can paint with white and black however much you want, and that allows you to crop an image and take parts in and out of it for use with all these layers you're using, without actually deleting it and losing that data forever. And what I do oftentimes is oops, I got it backwards. I'll use gradients, which look like this. That's a gradient from black to white. And you define the size of the gradient. If I just drag from here to here, so everything behind this starting point is black, and everyone past the end point is white, and in between is the gradient from one to the other. So if I want it to be consistent across the whole image, I have to start on one corner and end in the other corner. Whereas if I go like this, it'll be a really narrow gradient. And you can do this with any colors, and any two colors or a number of colors and so on. There's a bunch of different options for how the gradients work that I don't even fully understand. But if I do the gradient, that black to white gradient on this mask, and I'm careful about it, I can try to make something like this, where it like comes in and out of existence kind of smoothly. But here we have a problem. I don't want the previous layer's welcome to show up. There we go. I have to get the right angle so that it lines up with the entire thing. So now, if I go any further, you'll see the old welcome shining through, and that looks like garbage. But if I stop right there, you don't see it. Here's the issue. I have it set to black to white, which leads to a problem where it does this. You'll notice that up top it keeps resetting. And that's because I'm painting the entire thing black to white. Because if I do this on the normal image, like it looks like this. This is black to white gradient. But I only really want the black. So if we do to FG foreground to transparent, now it's just a black gradient and the white isn't there. This allows me to paint more and more black gradients on the background here without ever adding white, so I can keep kind of cropping further in until I'm happy with the bounding. Like it'll look vaguely like this, but on the mask layer, not just an actual layer of black. Now I can do that here and here. And now we're cleaning up these edges here, because those are the edges around my original crop I made. Turns out it was useful for me to have this. Once again, if I do this, you'll see the bossing, so I have to be careful. So it turns out it was useful for me to use the, to crop the background, because I can use the elements of the background available to me to kind of transition cleanly from this image's background to the original image's background, and make it unnoticeable in many spots. Here's where it's not great, but everywhere else it pretty much worked. Yeah, it pretty much worked everywhere except for right here where it goes from dark to light. We're definitely splitting hairs here on shit that no one's probably going to notice, but once I'm in the weeds, I care too much about this shit, apparently. So I'll sit here and obsess over this stuff for way too long. This sidebar I can use smudge tool to clear away without having to worry about too much. I have a way better idea. Undo all the things I just did. I have to hit Control Z a lot right now. There we go. We're back to when it was one layer. I succeeded at this mostly, so I'm gonna do a new layer. I'm gonna merge it down. So now we've deleted, now we've lost our mask data. Now the layer just is this. That's all it is right now. And I can't get any of the lost data back now. That's kind of fine, because it's kind of what I want right now. I can be a nasty boy now. And I can smudge all of this out and make the problem really not noticeable. One of the fun things about using image editing like this is you get to do a lot of creative problem solving. Or just like, I want this thing to look different, how do I fix that? If I duplicate it, it'll look like a little more solid, then merge those down. So now it's all to the edge, and now we just need to stencil it, basically. Which we're gonna add a layer mask again. So now this layer once again has a layer mask. I'm going to go down to the previous layer, and I'm going to select this area. There we go. So now I have the border, and that's what I want. And now I'm going to use the paint bucket tool on the mask layer for this. There we go. So now you can see, it's hard to see from here because it's really tiny, but I've now painted this area black on the mask layer, which makes it invisible. And there's another problem here, but we'll get to that in a second. So now if I hide everything else, it looks like this. So I smudged it out so that it goes to the boundary and doesn't have the weird transition where it keeps fading in and out of being the weird orangey, burny color. But then it turns invisible when it gets to the border, so it doesn't like bleed over. I'm now coloring within the lines, except for the obvious part. But that part's very fixable too. You just select this area, and you just do it again. Now that's fixable. And now we have the better version of the thumbnail than what he had a minute ago. Because that was the let's see, if we go back to the original, this was the thing I copy pasted in originally, and the logo doesn't fit if I do it like this. But if I do it where the logo fits, then the zombie gets squished out way more. And so I did all of that just because I wasn't happy with the zombie being over there as much as I'm happy with the zombie being way more in frame like this. So that's what we accomplished just now. I went from this to this. which I personally see as an upgrade. But you can do your own shit on your own channel, or not, because a lot of you're probably just watching this to see weird behind the scenes stuff. It's a little trippy seeing the logo changing size and whatnot. But anyway, yeah, we went from that to that, and that's how I made one thumbnail. Basing Stoke. Just want to have that correct in the naming so it doesn't go wrong. It's good to name everything correctly because then I can search it later if it ever comes up, which is just good practices. Especially if I'm keeping every thumbnail I ever make in a folder like this, like a lunatic. There's just so many. See, we don't need Anachronox open anymore. That's one down. It's exported, so I can just delete this data and make a new thumbnail now. And I don't need to keep this around. It's kind of fast and dirty, but I don't keep that stuff around necessarily because it's just this thing would get really crowded too fast. And I'm using it as a template. It's my workspace, and now my RAM can dump that data because we're done with it. Oh yeah, and I guess to do the I don't know if I did the test earlier, but you want to know that it looks good when it's small, and of course it does because it's a very blocky cartoon character, and it's a almost black text on an almost white background, so it's incredibly readable. Like this was an incredibly easy thumbnail to make. The only ones that are easier is when I look up an image and it's just like perfect. It's just perfect. Sometimes you look up an image and it's like it's already a perfect thumbnail, and you have to change fucking nothing. I think that was this guy. Yeah, the resolution's bad, but I'm pretty sure Horus, I just looked it up. I just looked it up and immediately had a thumbnail. I'm like, cool, done. That made my day easy. Whereas some of these are chaos, like Shank and Bake. This image vaguely exists, but I had to change it significantly to make the logo fit in the space, and it'll be framed well and so on. That one was fine. Do I have any really rough examples lately? I think One Piece probably would have been bad if I had to deal with it, but I didn't. So many thumbnails, I've covered so many games. These are the ones with Andrew. Do. So many fucking games, I've done this forever. It is amusing to have this giant fucking list of shit. Alright. This folder. We're looking at Tharsis. This one might make things hard for me. This is one of the first things I get when I look up Tharsis. And if it's not clear, this video is going to potentially give away upcoming videos, both full playthroughs and let's tries, just depending on when this comes out and when those come out. That's how. Yeah, this is not great. It's an interesting image at full size. It's like, ooh, spooky. But then you look at like small size, it's like it's just a muddy blotch with 3 vague figures. But the logo's nice and readable. It's not the worst. In a pinch, I might stick to thumbnails like this sometimes, just because the alternative's not always great. You often don't have a ton of great options for YouTube thumbnails. This might be a better image. Doesn't feature people. But it does have some color contrast in it. It definitely needs to be downscaled to my template size. I don't like the size of the logo. I'd probably replace that. It might look more interesting if both the spidery looking thing and the space station were both in frame. Which might be doable, but it might be a huge pain in the ass. I'll double check the listings just to see if I can find anything better with the face. The faces in this game aren't great. You have tiny astronaut people. This is a screenshot from the game. Like, these are faces. They don't look great. And they're like obscured behind weird masks. I don't think they're gonna look great blown up. So I might just stick with mechanical shit in this one. But it's gonna make this a longer process for me. That might be a pain in the ass. Alright, let's start by duplicating the layer. And I'm gonna bring this guy in, because I feel like it's gonna look better if we can see this guy in addition to the other guy. And what we're gonna do is, let's see if I can get away with using Magic Wand, but I don't know if that, yeah. So Magic Wand selects things based on similar color. And sometimes it's very helpful, and sometimes it makes everything fucking chaos. Let's see. Let's try selecting just an area and be a little more creative here. It selects based on similar color, and you set the threshold. So here's the idea: is can I use it to can I start with the selection area and then use it in a subtractive way instead of an additive way on a lower threshold to just remove Mars from the selection? That's mostly what I want. I just want to select the drone thing without selecting Mars. And this is way better than what I was doing a second ago. I really just need to get most of it, because then I can really quickly and sloppily just manually crop out the rest. Whereas if I don't have any magic tool helping me out, then I have to manually crop along the border, which I do this all the time. I'd have to do, like, point by point. I would select, like, the polygon's boundary around the entire thing I want, which in video game graphics is often pretty easy, because they often have sharp edges, even if it's not immediately apparent. But anyway, that's the best we're going to get from Magic Wands. Now I need to magically remove these areas. Because it's easy to carve out the guts of it. It's the details along the border that take way more time. So if Magic Wand can get most of that for me, then we will save significantly more time. And time is important. I have shit to do all the time. The thumbnails are, in many ways, the least appreciated part of my entire job. Just because if you're here for the content, these are not the content. But they are the package for the content. So it's not why, it's not what anyone is here for, but it's why a lot of you are here, is the way to put it. This kind of work is important to why my videos do well. You need good thumbnails, good SEO, timeliness, relevancy, and all the other algorithm-y shit. And you just want to, and then whenever people look up stuff or see stuff in the sidebar or whatever, you want to be the people that people click on. Which is why there's a big push to have a custom thumbnail for every single video if you can, but I have too much video output for that. So I'm making it, there we go. So that's a pretty good selection. So we just have the drone selected and nothing else. So I'm gonna add a mask, layer mask. And then I'm just gonna fucking bucket out everything around it. Oopsie. Did I just use it? No, okay. So we select layer mask, and then we're going to... Oh, right. Right now only the drone is selected. So we actually want to do select invert selection. So now we're selecting everything except the drone. And then I can get that all the fuck out. And that's pretty good. So now the drone is currently in the image alongside this guy, and that wasn't available before. But we have the issue, which is that the previous drone is here still. So we have the issue that I had with the Bossing Stoke logo, where the two things come out together. My options for fixing this are not always great. Let's see. Let's save this in case I need to come back to it. In case I fuck this all up. But that's basically one idea, is I can take the white paint and paint on this, so it looks like this. I'm just painting the image back in that I just deleted. If I do that really carefully, I can get rid of the copy of the drone from the other image in a way that looks okay. Ooh, we're having a glitch here. You okay, game? Okay. So, that looks really clean. That worked out great. This one didn't look like it was going to work out as great. Oops. Wrong layer. Yeah, there's a color difference in the dirt that's distracting. That's not great. It's not great. It's not the type of detail that people would actively notice, but I care too much. Oopsie. I have to be careful, because if I smudge the transparency... If I smudge the transparency here, I can make the transition look more natural. But if I'm not careful, I'll smudge the thing that I don't want to look like it's fading in and out. This is working alright. The important thing about a lot of this is not... it's picking your battles a little bit about how careful and good you want everything to look, because you have work to do besides this. That cleaned it up decently. I could definitely see it, but I don't know how much people would see it if they didn't know that the problem was there in the first place. It's kind of obscuring it. I imagine it's a little bit like when you cut someone's hair and you do like the straight cut at the beginning that determines the length, and then you do the other cuts that change the that like even it, that add chaos to it, so you don't just see a really even cut across somebody's head. Let's see. Ooh, they gave me a nice transparent logo. We can use this as my logo on the top layer amongst the images. But there's an issue here. There's like weird color variances. I just want this to be white. So I'm gonna select this part of it. I don't want to lose the dot. The little dot can stay in its original color. I'm gonna go brightness and contrast, set contrast to 0. So now it's just a gray mess. That just evens it out so that I don't have to deal with any weird variances. Now I'll do brightness and contrast both all the way up, and it'll be perfectly white. I can probably just put this in the middle of the screen, because there's actually a decent amount of negative space there to just throw the logo. You know what? I don't care about this dot anymore. This dot is too Mars colored, so it's not going to be visible. So I'll just try to frame the logo across the screen. We're getting places. I'm getting happy with this logo, with this thumbnail. Here's the fucking bad part. Obviously. Let's duplicate this layer so it can go back to it if I fuck up. This looks like Garbo. I want a nice fuzzy selection area. We're gonna clone. So you want to clone, when you have a gradient like this where it's like planet to atmosphere to space, you want to select a similar part and then clone that onto it. That it's not, because if I do it from here, then it's like, well, now it's the wrong color. And obviously, like, you don't want to get the fucking boundary of the planet wrong. So you're kind of selecting a similar place, and if you're smart, you'll notice like, oh, that's the same crater repeating. It's because they use the clone tool there. You kind of stagger it. Like this one's in shadow, so I want to use it from the shadow area. That doesn't look great because there's also smoke here, so that's pretty fucky. I can really carefully add the smoke if I do one little click at a time instead of, you know, yeah, it's like applying makeup apparently. Don't think too much into that metaphor because I actually don't know if that would even made any sense. That went faster than expected. It looks pretty good. There's a really obvious problem, which is that. I did a bad job on like my very first click, so the actual boundary of the planet does not look good. Me trying to work fast for presentation purposes. Some of this is why on cooking shows they're like, and then we put that in the oven, and wow, here's what it looks like when it's done. And they just magically pull out a completely different one that they already made before the show started. There we go, that looks pretty good. Overall, this thumbnail went pretty quickly. I'm debating whether to put a black border around Tharsis or not. I guess I can show how I do that, just because I haven't done that yet, but I don't know if I wanted it or not. So here's one way to do it, but it's not the way I usually do it. So you use the tool, you use the selection tool to select the logo and all the elements of it. Make a new layer. I can do select, grow, and then you get a grow selection. Like how many pixels do you want to make it bigger? Let's say 5 pixels. It now grew the area. So now if I put this on an, it's selected an area that's bigger than the logo. So now if I do plunk, I can paint that whole area black. Then I can put it under the logo, and now there's a black outline around the logo. That's a pretty quick and easy way to do it. If you don't totally love those jagged edges, then you can just do a blur pass. That'll make it look a little cleaner, kind of. But really, neither version looks different at this distance. But I don't always love the look of that, for whatever reason. And maybe it's my bad design sensibilities or whatever. I'll leave it there so we can look at it again later. But what we want to do is lighten shadow, drop shadow. And then if you just do drop shadow normally, it does it like this. And I can sit here and duplicate it over itself. But if I duplicate it, it like doubles the shadow effect on itself. And then you can merge that down and duplicate it again. And you're essentially just multiplying the effect because it's a relatively subtle shadow at first and you can keep adding to it. This is a pretty common effect. The drop shadow at this offset is more offset to the bottom right corner. It has a offset X, offset Y, so it specifically is going to the right and the bottom when it's being made. But that's not necessarily my preference either in many cases. I like to center it in many cases instead of having it look like it's shadowed, so I set these to 0. Oopsie. I went too fast because I'm doing it for demonstration purposes, so I'm fucking up. I had to get rid of the drop shot I made a second ago. I forgot to unselect allow resizing and it changed the resolution of the entire image because it technically wants to make some of the drop shadow over here off the frame and it makes the whole image bigger to do it. But that's a problem for me when the aspect ratio has to be the exact appearance that a thumbnail is supposed to be. So this time you can see it's equidistant, or it's sticking up by an equal amount in every direction right now, which will be more apparent when I make it stronger. Because drop shadow is really subtle as an effect, so I do this annoying process where I duplicate it, then I merge it down, then I duplicate it, and I merge it down, I duplicate it, and I merge it down, and now it's darker. And it sticks out in all directions, and that's the look I like. It's a fade out version, because this was the solid border one, and this is the fade out one. I like it better when it fades out. And so that's pretty much how I make most of the dark borders on most things. Or light borders. You just, if you want to do light border, you just set it to any other color really, instead of black. You can set it to white or whatnot. You can, also, sometimes I'll realize the last second I want to change something about the color, so I'll select the drop shadow, do color invert, and now it's white, and I can even select the logo and do color invert and make it black. And so you can instantly decide like, oh, I think this thumbnail looks better with a black logo with a white border on it. But I don't think that. But that's how you would do that. That's enough for now. Alright, get rid of this. Next game on the docket is Undungeon. Ooh, that's an interesting image we got there. I already exported this, right? Tharsis, right there. Yep. Delete all this shit, because it's already done with. As you can see, making the thumbnail can take as long as making the video. It's why it's ideal not to make it to the new thumbnail every time. This is a nice image for a thumbnail. Got a nice creepy skull thing going on, which is the face of the character you play as in the game. I can work with that. You put the logo over here or something. But what kind of logo are we dealing with? So this one has the logo on it. This actually might be my thumbnail. We might be done already. It says Undungeon. This one's exactly 720 pixels already in height, so I need to make it line up exactly with my current frame. There we go. Center it. I think that's about it. Just do it by eye a lot of the time. That's looking pretty done. The biggest flaw with this one is this. The time code's going to cover part of the logo. It's going to look like Undungeon. And you're like, what's those last two letters? Which I'm not in love with. I wonder if I can get a different copy of the skull. If I get a different copy of the skull, then I could put the Undungeon on his forehead if I get a better framed image of this. Here's a different image of the skull from somewhere else in the game. It's a little rough. A lot of the negative space is definitely down here. And so you would want to... It's like screaming to me to put the stuff there. But we can give ourselves a little bit more headroom space if I expand it again. That's workable. This might be a good example of the auto adjust, by the way. Auto, like that. See, it changes the entire color a bit. Reset, auto, reset, auto. One of the big things that auto does, the auto adjustive contrast, is that it often deletes the color temperature of the original image, essentially. It has an amazing power to just delete the color temperature, sometimes revealing which things are all color temperature. And again, just the logo on its own. That would come in handy. They're not going to make it easy on me. I don't see any Undungeon logo only images that are just the text. Almost all of them have... This might be workable actually, but although it's kind of small. But like almost all of them have this thing with it. And a decent number of them have like dramatic effects that get in my way. All this bleedy shit. Like if I wanted to get the logo out, then I have to figure out how to isolate from all that, and it's just gonna be a lot of work. This one might be a workable image if it was higher resolution. I can deal with like half of the skull and then it fading to half, like it fading to the logo. It's not gonna frame well though. Yeah, it's a pretty dark version of the skull. It doesn't look great in small resolutions, and this is all off frame. We might just want to go with this and just move on with my life. Yeah, that's a slightly better contrast. You can also do saturation. That looks a little bit better. Gives the skull a bit more color. I think I'm just gonna live with that one. I've got games to record today. I've got shit to do. Wait, where's those images I was showing Marty? This is a side tangent, but you guys might remember this image from recently. This is my World of Warcraft character up here, and this is the mount that I just unlocked, and the pet that I had to kill so many foxes to get, which is kind of horrifying. And then my fox pets. It was just this gag of like, they made a fox playable race, so I could play as this like orange fox, but then I could look through and like, okay, how do I get this fox brigade? But it wasn't just enough to be 5 foxes. I wanted them to specifically all be orange to match my character. And it turns out this guy and this guy are both a huge pain in the ass to get nowadays, whereas these are just randos you just tame and it's no big deal. The funny thing about this image is that it's a nighttime screenshot in World of Warcraft, but it looks like a daytime screenshot. And it's because I used the auto adjust tool that's in GIMP. And it just straight up like, it turns out, as far as I can tell, the nighttime effect in World of Warcraft, at least in Dalaran, is basically just a color temperature effect. And to demonstrate that, I don't have this image, I don't have the original copy of this image anymore, but I do have this nighttime screenshot. It's like this was taken at nighttime in the same location as this. 1 day apart, but yeah, this is nighttime screenshot in Dalaran, and this is nighttime screenshot in Dalaran. So let's duplicate this layer for funsies. Then I will color, brightness, contrast, auto. Just like that. Like it more or less looks like a daytime screenshot. It's slightly weirder and bloomier than the other one was. Like this one definitely was a cleaner edit that looks like, wow, that just looks like daytime, whereas this one looks there's something slightly weird about the color contrast here. And his face or something, but like it more or less looks like a daytime image. I just got a kick out of how easy and complete that change was. The foxes look different because these actually are different foxes. I hadn't found the orange ones yet. So they just actually are brown. These orange ones came later. And that's just a silly novel detail. Just the way that these two things line up the way they do. So I should line them up better. Anyway, that's just complete tangent. But we're pretty much done for today. This took longer than expected. It's like an hour and a half. I could pretty much just leave it here, but maybe I'll show more examples throughout the week and splice that into this video. I'll see you guys next time. Now, if there's more. And we're back the next day. This is probably it. This is probably gonna be the last one, because that the last one's like an hour and a half long, I think. So let's just cap this off with a few more, and then that's enough video. I'm gonna be less available this weekend, or later this week as it goes on. So it's best if I get this like edited and rendered early on, and then we're good. So yesterday I did 4 more Let's Tries. Ever Forward, Hellpoint, Hellbound. And, look how pretty this game is. I didn't really skip around these videos last time, did I? It was Hellbound. Very snappy. Hellpoint. Wow, I wonder what genre this one might be. Doesn't look anything like any other particular game on this channel. Valfaris. And that's what we make videos for. This is the ones from earlier in this video. Basingstoke. I have no idea which of these are going to be up by the time this goes up, and which ones won't be, or whatever. They're all different. They're all in different places overall. But this is Tharsis. We did a video of last time, or a thumbnail of. A dice rolling, save the space station sort of game. Undungeon. Anyway, back to it. And of course, Anachronox. For all the work that took. Alright, so let's start with Ever Forward, mainly because I happen to already be opening up a tab for that. Funnily enough, this one might be instantly over. Get rid of yesterday's work. Get out of here. Well, yeah, that's this thing that I thought I might use, but then I didn't. This one might be a hilariously easy thumbnail. Shrink you down so you fit in frame. Gotta reset. What happens is when I first start using the scaling tool, this window pops up, and then this little lock here is not checked at first, and that makes it skew. So then I have to start scaling it, then hit this little chain, then reset, and then start over. It's just a second, so it doesn't really matter. But that's what the reset is for. It's because it's when you first start using the tool, it doesn't default to having the aspect ratio locked, which means you're going to scale badly. Honestly, that's a thumbnail. you have a logo, you have a character. It's kind of evocative and neat looking. Oh, that logo is unreadable. It's a good image for a thumbnail, but that logo is not readable. So that's going to take a little more work than expected. Ideally, I would find a logo I can use. That one's kind of low resolution. I would want a transparency, but that one's not transparent, but it's the only one I've found so far. Always just Google transparent and hope for the best. The problem with Ever Forward is that it's a kind of a generic sounding company bullshit name. So getting a whole lot of other shit. How did I get the Death Stranding logo? How did Google image search take me here? Alright, we're gonna have to probably make do with this one. Either make do with this one or try to salvage it from this image we started with, which might be doable. We probably want higher than 15. But if we go too much higher in our resolution, then we have to worry about selecting parts of the background. Yeah. This is pretty not ideal. It's got chromatic aberration going on, which is that green and red there. Usually it's kind of blue and red, but whatever. If you see like one color coming out of the side of white in one direction, then a different color coming out on the other side, like that's chromatic aberration. There's a bunch of different versions of that. It's usually to infer that something is digital, but sometimes people just use it as a generic, wow, shit's crazy right now, sort of thing. And it's not always coherent in its application. What about this one? Is this higher quality than the one I'm looking at right there? Technically, I just have to crop out our foot, but this is higher resolution than that one is. Get rid of that one. Could almost use this as the thumbnail. Let's do search image. A fun trick is that you can do a reverse image search, where if you right click on an image you're searching for online, you can search Google for all other instances of that image. Which can be useful, because when you search for all other instances of that image, one of the options you get is the option to show it at different sizes. And so sometimes the algorithm is not showing you other useful images for this purpose because they're duplicates, essentially. And they don't want to spam you with a bunch of duplicates of the same image, but they're technically different resolutions from each other. So if you do a reverse image search by right-clicking on it and doing search this image on Google, it'll give you a bunch of copies of the same image over and over again that are all different resolutions. And then suddenly you can actually make sense of all that. And so you might get a much better version of an image that you're already trying to use. see. How good can we get with 50? Yeah, we have a perfect black on white contrast right now. So it's actually relatively easy to get a pretty quick and dirty crop out of the entire background. I can just get rid of all of this. I'm just trying to select everything that's not the text, because I want to delete everything that's not the text, while potentially keeping all the weird noise stuff that's coming with the text. That's kind of intended. Allow this text has nice jagged edges that I can manually just draw squares at. And to repeat, this is all just happening because I want the logo to be more readable than it's going to look. Because right now it's way too white on white. And that is hard to read. That's pretty much her cropped out. The trick here is that if I have a separate copy of the logo, assuming that they're using the same logo everywhere and it's the exact same logo, I can actually make it the same size as the one we already have and then just overlap them. More or less. Not perfect. Yeah, there's like some skewing going on. Some of these extra details over here are like taller, but this E is the same height. Then when you go across the logo, it's a different width. So in this case, we don't want to maintain the same aspect ratio necessarily as we scale it. Because apparently they didn't. Apparently they rescaled it without maintaining the aspect ratio. Oh, I thought I did that right. There we go. That's pretty close. Because the whole point is just I want a cropped version of the logo. Because then I can take that cropped version of the logo that's on its own layer, and I can do the whole drop shadow thing again to give it a border. So if it has a black, because that's like that practically like internet meme thing. Oops. About text is that white text on a black background. White text with a black border can be read on any background. So even though the background's too light and the text is light and so on, if I just take that text, which was unreadable at this distance, as you can see here, and then I just give it a black background, it's instantly readable. So now it's readable at thumbnail sizes, which is that size-ish, like these sizes. It's clearly readable. And also the fact that they didn't perfectly overlap is erased by the fact that the black border I'm putting on the text mostly gets rid of whatever was behind it anyway. But now the part of me that cares too much is going to want to fix it anyway. So we can just paint over some of these elements. There's some fringe elements out here where they really don't overlap. But I can actually just take the background color. I'm not even using the clone tool, I'm being really dirty about this. I'm just painting over it with black. So now if I hide the text, it looks like this. Like I'm just scribbling over parts of the text that I notice are sticking out and look bad, that are still noticeable past the black background. Little duplications and whatnot. Oops, don't want to get that part. We're definitely like beyond the part where any of this is going to get noticed by a casual observer. But it's the part of me that just tries to do a decent job at some of this stuff. Because it's stuff I'm putting out there. closer to the middle, the more they overlap successfully already, which is good. Some of this stuff, you can see there's copies of these things are slightly off, which is a little frustrating. That said, let's merge down those layers. The answer there might just be to get rid of the copies I made and just leave the original background stuff there instead. Ooh, but you can see all these... You can see these, like, shadows. There we go, because that's from the drop shadow. There, now I'm just letting the original particles shine through in those spots, because fuck it. That cleaned up a lot of them. It's just this tiny detail here. I can fill this in by painting it like this color. And then invert. Paint the area outside with that color. And now it's a clean point at the end. Too clean, actually. Let's undo that second painting I did. There we go. It's now under the text. It's now back to being a triangle point, at least. Because I shaved out the corner of it a little bit, and then that's covered by the shadow, and it's clean. Anyway. I lose a lot of time to dumb micro details like that. I don't 100% love this. Yeah, the auto contrast doesn't do anything because it already has, like, all the way from black to white. Is that recognizably a human figure? This whole idea might have been bad. The thumbnail might not be readable enough as being a person from the get-go. He's laying sideways on the diamond. Actually, might be better just to throw something like this in there. Then we have the issue of the time code to watch out for. Maybe I just, yeah, just bring it higher. I want it as low as I can get against the time code, just because otherwise she's weirdly, like, too high in the frame, and there's a bunch, and there's too much, there's more black under than below. Yeah. It kind of has that art, that stark, artsy aspect. It communicates somewhat, like, what the game's gonna be. A little bit. Curious if I can do anything tricky with this. Is that what I meant to do? Copy this to a new layer. Does not look amazing. But the idea was to try to contrast her up a little bit. It does kind of look better. Nope. The main difference is, yeah, because she's such a pure gray silhouette that the increased contrast does kind of make things a bit cleaner here. But the outline looks weird. We can add a layer mask around the outside. We can paint that area black, which means hide it. And then we can blur that mask. F. Whoop. What have I done? Nah. May have gotten a little aggressive there. Was I on the right layer there? The idea was wondering if I can blur the edges of visibility, it can blend with the original layer that's still under it. By just making the edges of this image fade out a little bit. This is officially beyond the pale. This is too much work. It's gonna look like this anyway. And it looking a little glitchy adds to it anyway. I'm probably just gonna leave it there. There's like a certain amount of like triage to silliness to this stuff. When it comes to like making all of these images and just like when you're making large amounts of content, there's a certain triage aspect of like how much time do you want to spend on each thing, and it's like this is fine, that's enough, move on to the next project. Can't be satisfied about every project, especially when it's just the thumbnail. Like, all right, so that's enough of ever forward. Do Valferris next. Did you make this easy on me? Did you guys make this really easy on me by having a framed character with a logo already over him, while also leaving a weird amount of blank space on the left side of the screen? Oopsie. That is easily replaced by my it's almost like they were waiting for my sidebar to get to be put there. Is that all it's going to take? There's something I don't love about it, but it's still like, maybe don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I'm looking through the assets available for this game, and it really does look like that logo and that dude are basically all the art that exists for this game. That is an in-game render, and as we saw before, this game is a relatively low-resolution side-scroller platformer, which looks nice, but not very thumbnail-y. Like, I don't want to put this guy on the thumbnail, because he's incredibly blurry once you blow him up to the size of the image. It's like, there's cool images here, but... yeah, oh yeah, that's just straight up the title screen. Like, that's just what the title screen looks like. But even lower resolution here. So, like, this is the one art asset they have, basically. That's it's pretty much going to be the thumbnail. Well, that was easy. Delete it because it's already exported. That's all I need. All right, Hellpoint. Hellpoint was that Souls-like from a minute ago. Kind of like Souls-like plus Doom a little bit. Like the hell and religious aspect and space plus red lighting and metal and gore everywhere. One of those universes where it's just miserable to exist ever, so you're kind of wondering like, what are we even fighting for in the first place? This looks like a pretty good starting image to work with. Just need to get a logo on it. There's a certain temptation to try to put the figure behind in, because that's a good aspect of the image, but once you zoom out, it's really hard to make out anything besides the eyes, and without the context of the rest of the head around it, it's even hard to tell that they're eyes. So probably just keep these three figures in frame and leave it at that. And maybe expand the image so that their heads are closer to the top of the image. They fill the frame. So now these three figures fill the frame pretty solidly. Probably biased in favor of making the guy in the middle look like he's in the middle, more so than trying to frame these two people's chests towards being centered. He's so eerily slender, it looks like the image is skewed, but I've played the game, and the character just is really slender in a kind of distressing looking way. That's pretty tempting too, though. This is an art asset. Well, it's an in-game visual, but it's this cool multi-armed boss fight, I'm sure. You can't really clearly tell that there's a knight standing in front of him, especially when you zoom out. But the cluster of arms and stuff is a cool image. Like, just showing that might be more eye-catching than just a dude. Like, it's like, what the fuck is that game? Why has that guy got so many arms? But also, maybe I can do like a... Instead of zooming out, maybe I can zoom in. Maybe I can focus on his creepy face and have that more in frame and only show the arms on one side of his body. Maybe that translates better to an image than this. Yeah. You gotta work with the space you're given. So creepy, multi-faced guy with a bunch of arms sticking out. That's kind of a cool visual. I think I'm happy with that. So just gotta find a logo. And if I'm lucky, it'll be transparent, but they're often not, so I've got to make them work on my own. This one's got a black background. It's good enough. Good enough to be fixed, at least. Sup, sup, sup. Loop. And delete. Oopsie. What did I just press? Oh, I just changed layers on accident? Okay. Do 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 do. So that's where our thing is. I can get pretty low, or I can go for centering it-ish. So it's kind of a back and forth. Let's add the shadows first. And then I can link the two layers together and move them as one. And then we can look at what we think it looks like at that point. A lot of games have this super spaced out design to the logo that I don't love. I think it makes it harder to read in many cases at a glance. So I don't necessarily love it. Another thing I can do foreground to transparent, make sure it's pure black, bilinear. Bilinear changes my gradient so that it does this. So you've probably seen this in some of my thumbnails before too. We want to do it on a new layer though, because the layer I'm looking at has a set size that is smaller than the rest of the layers we're using. So here, each letter has a black background around its frame, like this, but there's also a black line going through the whole back of them to kind of join the logo together and make it look a little readable as a whole, because it looks like this without that. This kind of adds to that. I think I've mostly centered it on just by going by eye. Could do a lot. It's often not worth it to do it any other way. Oopsie. I think I moved the wrong layer. There we go. Try to center the text a little better. The question was, where do I want to I can put it right above the logo. Gives it more space to show all this stuff. But it kind of obscures this bottom arm entirely. Because if I put it like higher up, like right in the armpit, I think this is the ideal. Because you can see two arms up here and one arm down here, so you can still make out what's happening, and it just is in the way of part of the hand here a little bit. Gives you this chaotic, somewhat distressing sort of visual. And it's nowhere near the timestamp, so it's totally fine. Let's duplicate the logo and then hide one of the layers, so I just have a save for later if I want to come back and change it. But I don't think I like how the logo is this gradient of color. I think I would like to smash that color out and just make it white for readability. Ta-da! So it used to look like this. Now it looks like this. And I think for thumbnails purposes, that's useful shit. And if we want to, we can also... See, brightness and contrast would be bad for this because it'd make the... Yeah. This is what happens when you try to do brightness and contrast in something that's mostly just one color, is it tries to smash it so that there's white and black on the screen. It can mess with the saturation. But no, what I want to do is I want to think maybe saturate it up. Just to accentuate the redness of the hell. So it looks like this now, and it looked like this before. It was just more plastery before, and now it's a little more blood red-ish. Going in that territory. I don't love the little crown, the little guy down here that's just kind of butting in, but the timestamp's going to cover him anyway, and he's pretty not noticeable for the most part. He almost looks like a weird centered piece of the character's armor. Or whatever you want to call what they're wearing. If they're even wearing it. I think that's just, I think they're a robot. I don't think they're wearing it. I think it's just what their body is. Whatever purpose. Alright. We're being borderline efficient today. Except for that part where I spent a bunch of time editing an image that I didn't even end up using. Some of these people, like, they just get me. They're just here to help me out and give me exactly what I need to do my job quickly, and they don't even seem to know it. And it's just because they're making stuff... I already exported it, right? It's right there. They're just making banners and whatnot that happen to, like, sometimes perfectly fit into what I want them to be. This one looks really promising, like it might be done already. But its aspect ratio is a little, it may not fit in my frame. And I don't usually settle for skewing it. Oh, it's fitting. Oh, fuck. That fits. We had some easy ones today. Oof. The readability of that logo suffers from scaling. Because it's all chaotic and textured. Because they're trying, this is the most clearly, like, Doom-inspired game ever. There's so many Doom-inspired games, but this one's explicit about it. Like, it basically steals the logo, like, font, and, like, the go-to images, the like level select progression screen look the same and so on. What is that? Oh, I'm getting search results for like a Hellbound movie that's completely unrelated. Ooh. They have a blue background one. Can I get a larger resolution version of it? Please. Is that a higher resolution, or that wasn't higher resolution? That was just somebody making it bigger forcefully. That one's better. Okay. This one's higher resolution, but not super high resolution. But as you can see, somebody made a blue. Not somebody, the people that made the game, or did the art in the first place at least. They have a blue background variant out there. A little more cropped, but I can work with that. You have this dude, and he's being a big muscle boy, and he's got his Hellbound logo. It's way more readable than this one was. He's not in frame as much, and I don't think I can get it separated And then this guy's not necessarily higher resolution anywhere. There was also a difference between this is 2D art and that's 3D art. Like that's an upgrade on the resolution of everything. We haven't done this much, but I have all these other versions of me in here. So there's my blue shirt, which is the default. There's pixelated blue shirt. Uh-oh, blue shirt. Red, orange, purple. Oh, green, black and white, and then Santa. These are just like variations I've used. Just whenever I make a new variation for the use of a Let's Try thumbnail, it just kind of stays here and lives here forever. So I made this like last Christmas, I think, and I put texture everywhere to make it look less flat because I just straight up drew it by hand. So I drew this by hand, trying to make an ugly sweater. This is for one that if the whole thumbnail is black and white, I'll have my character on the side be black and white to just kind of match the thumbnail a bit. I could have done that back here. Although this is not a black and white game, so it's not necessarily adding to the aesthetic of the game. I think I usually do it when the game is black and white. Otherwise, it's just like the blue adds some color and pop to an otherwise stark thumbnail or whatever. It's all nonsense. There's not a lot of rules to it. As you can see in here, I have not been using variations lately that much, but a lot of these looked good with a blue shirt. Like there's like a lot of these like red and orange thumbnails, and you can just leave the blue shirt there, and it's fine. Whereas if you go through, the thumbnails aren't the same size. But a lot of my thumbnails I have different colors, but it's just basically whatever I'm feeling like. But this is a case where I felt like something different. I see this whole blue background, and I'm like, I want my shirt to contrast that. So let's go to the red shirt. That's pretty much the thought process. It's just color coordination, which I've technically been educated on at some point. I think I've taken a few different art classes, but not that much. I haven't gone down the rabbit hole, and I've not practiced it that much, but I have like some kind of feel for it sometimes of trying to fix the color. I think I'm happy with that. I don't think I'm going to be able to like get him more in frame without, like, one of the downsides of this other one is that he's way smaller in frame too, so it's harder to see him at all, which might work better with the blue background if I can get a copy of this guy, but then he still would be scaled down and a lot of it would be empty, so it's maybe best just to show this guy like waist up. This is probably plenty. I think I'm happy with this. Oops, what did I just hit? Oh, Control D. One of those commands that I basically forget what it does. And that's Hellbound, and Hell Point, and Ever Forward, and what else did we do? Other game, Valferis, there we go. Alright, well that went clean-ish, but still, it just takes time. It still took over half an hour. And so it goes! As you can see, like, some of these are done instantly, just because the art assets are so convenient to my purposes that I don't even have to do anything. But then there's other times where I have definitely just sat here and obsessed. Like, I've iterated on one thumbnail like 4 times and had like a system where like I'm so happy with a version of the thumbnail that I then like copy that file, like this whole GIMP file, into like a separate thing, and I save as a new name so I can revert back to the older thing later. Usually that's for playthrough though, not for a Let's Try. For a Let's Try, I'll usually cut my losses sooner. But when it comes for like a full series thumbnail, I'll often like go way deeper down trying to edit the whole thing. There's a whole bunch of details here. Like, you can kind of see the steps I went through here. Where like I totally just tried to have this logo, like just have this thing in the background and just have the logo over it, which is like what the cover of the game looks like, as you can see here. So I tried just having a version of this as my thumbnail. In fact, I think, yeah, that probably was one of my drafts, essentially, was this exact image, but I'm like, it's too chaotic and it's hard to read the logo a little bit, but also it's hard to recognize the person. Then I tried having like this dude, like I I took a screenshot of I usually do it at the in the character creator screen or character editor screen or whatever, because that's usually where you get to see a nice, well-framed version of your character on a clean background that could be edited out easily. And you can see here that I increased the contrast to make him pop a little bit more. We have that version of him. And then I put him on a clean background, because originally, let's see here, if I disable layer mask, you'll see what he used to look like. Like, that's the background we started with. This is what the character creator screen looks like. But it wasn't big enough of a screenshot for my purposes when I made it. So I just did a color gradient in the background that matches it, and then I deleted it. I deleted this and just left that there. So it takes us to just having this background here that's like that, but it doesn't have the texture, but has the color scheme of the character creator screen that the screenshot was from. And then I try to put the logo in, and then it's like cropped fucky because the source wasn't amazing. But then you put the shadow on it and you don't really notice that anymore because it's the same color. And then put the shadow behind it. What happened here? Oh, I put finale in. Wait. Now I'm going a little crazy. What does the actual thumbnail for this series look like again? Oh, right. No, that was me iterating. At one point I wanted to have the background, and so you can see the relics there of me working on that, because I ultimately just went with a variation of the silhouette dude. So this would have been this background thing right here. The gradient is where like the logo was originally, but then now it's just a layer that's left over. Because then we ended up with just this guy. So I ended up with a compromise between the two things. Because it's a good way to fill space. The issue I had with this thumbnail is that it's so empty. Like I want a clear logo and a clear character, but I don't necessarily want the rest of the thumbnail to just be empty entirely. So if I can fill that detail with something, then I can put that there. And so like we have a silhouette, and he's behind my dude, and he's also this is the recognizable cover of the game. So if you're looking for the game, like this kind of catches your eye a little bit if you're searching for it, and it kind of just adds stuff to fill the space that was otherwise empty, while being like relatively framed well to use the space well, while also not being so distracting that it's like takes away from the image. Like you really still, I think the eye still clearly latches onto logo and face, and then that's just like background detail to fill it in. I think a good example of this is Pillars of Eternity. I spent a lot of time on this thumbnail, just going through ideas and you can see how many fucking layers there are here. Yeah, here's the logo for Pillars of Eternity. It's this big, chaotic, crystal-y mess. It's just like a lot to deal with, so I cropped it down. I cropped it down to just the plaque in the middle without the crystals on it. That gives you like a clearer read on the logo itself. But like as you can see, like there's this is the character portrait of what this character looks like, because boop, boop, like this is what you get if you just use the character portrait of the dwarf character that I happen to use. Like this is the portrait you get, and as you can see, it cuts off really cleanly here. And so I needed to figure out how to make it look better. So get rid of that again. So you can see I painted it. Like I painted more hair here, which is like I think I used this the chalk icon here. Oopsie. It looks like this. Like that's the chalk texture. Like I basically like just mashed some chalk here that looks vaguely that was sampled from his hair color, and when you zoom at it, you can't really tell that I added anything there. And I also like did some like chalking and clone tooling to like just make his shoulder keep going, so he just kind of has a shoulder that wasn't in the image that I just added. It's not, as you can see up close, it's not detailed or at all, but like that's what the real shoulder looked like. It's like not that. It's not massively noticeable till you zoom in on it. That's just like this, because it is just a texture kind of, and it's just like his cape over his shoulder. Then I also like just sort of textured up this background so that it wasn't just cutting off clearly, because there was a vertical line going through this image where this image just ends, and I needed to make it not just end there so it looked good in the thumbnail. And then you have the issue of this flat gradient in the background, so I just took this dragon icon. There's just this like dragon concept art from the game that looks really cool. And you can't necessarily tell what you're looking at when you look at the thumbnail, but it adds a bunch of cool lines that are technically assets related to the actual game, so it's not completely unrelated. And that's how you get this fucking thumbnail. Like, this fucking thumbnail started off as just like, character portrait, game logo. Shit, how do I make this work? And then it's like, I got it, bro. Go from this to this. And it takes, and like, in some cases this takes hours, because I'm like, this is gonna be this is a fucking RPG that I'm gonna probably have to have like 100 episodes of. I've got to make it work. And, I've got to have something I'm kind of happy with, and I'll sometimes just spend hours trying to get anything I'm happy with until I start literally just painting it myself in some cases. And that's how we got that thumbnail. It's not like masterwork or anything, but I definitely have like cases where I'm happy with something eventually. I think this was I think Ori and the Will of the Wisps was a case where I customized the logo. I think the logo looked different. I think I have the logo in here. Sometimes I want it all to be readable, whether that's even really necessary or not. I'm now re-downloading the logo so I can show you guys. Like, this was the original logo, or just say Ori. Like, I could have just put that there and just said fuck it, and it's like, that's good enough. But I kind of wanted the text to be readable, in particular because there's like, look, it goes away, like immediately you can't read any of that. And there's two games called Ori. There's Ori and the Blind Forest and Ori of the Will of the Wisps. And in both cases, I believe I changed the logo to be more readable, because the rest of it's really unreadable. So I specifically was like, here's your Ori, and then here's and the Will of the Wisps. Like, I made them way bigger. It's not amazing, because it's a really chaotic logo, because they did the and the Will of the Wisps, which is how the original logo looked too. And the Will of the Wisps, but I just try to blow them up a bit. Just to try to help with the whole thing a little bit. I think you were the same way. Yeah. It's blurry because you can see how I scaled it up a lot, but it's less noticeable at smaller sizes, but it's and the Blind Forest, because once again, I think they did and the Blind Forest, and it was like right here in a little bar, and I tried to like make it readable, and it was more effective in this case. But once again, face, figure, logo, like characters, logo, there's like a system here. You just try to make it work somehow. Sometimes I replace the logo with the word finale, and sometimes I put finale in the corner, depending on just what the existing thing is framed like. But yeah, this is a lot going on here. There's a lot going on here. So there's the logo, but then also like the background is added separately. It's like each character was added. I found 3 separate pieces of character art from the game that were each, thankfully, I think, already included as transparent backgrounds, so all I did was download them. Then I put a blue background behind each one to make them stand out from the background and each other, just to help sort the chaos of the image a little bit. And this is just a screenshot of the game. You can see the characters on it and everything. But I don't think you can make that out. Yeah. Because this one's the only one that's not covered by a character, and that might be covered by the, yeah, it's covered by the logo. So you can't see the characters, so you just have a cave background. Then I even put like a basalt column texture on the sidebar just because I felt like it. Which you do that by just you just crop the image the way you want it. You just put it there, and then you just cut off this area, which is partly done by like I select for the sidebar itself. For the sidebar there is a layer mask, so I can just magic wand that area where the layer mask is black, and then I can just apply that to any other layer by just switching layers, then deleting everything that's currently selected, and that just does it for me. Let's see. I don't really have a plan here, so I'm just kind of like thinking like, is there anything else I want to show that might be interesting? There's Ashley's sock puppet. This one's not interesting. It's just a logo and a character. I mean, a lot of them are, but that one came to me for free. This is another example of me using 3 pieces of character art and a background that's unrelated and just making them a logo together. Legendary Gary. Just trying to make everything as readable and kind of appealing as possible. And it scales really well because it's that kind of art. Very colorful. Intelligent Cube. That's an example of me replacing finale logo with the finale. But this is just me using... This is a case where I have very little to work with, so I just kind of do what I can. Because it's like a PlayStation 1 game, and there's like no art assets online because it's ancient. You just do what you can. So if it's like kind of pre-internet games, you pretty much just have the cover of the game to work with. So yeah, in cases like this is just the cover of the game. And it just so happens that his face and the Onimusha logo are close enough to each other that I can put that perfectly into a thumbnail, and I didn't have to do any additional work. And if I had to do any additional work, it would have been way hard to make a decent thumbnail out of it, because Onimusha is from like 20 years ago. That makes it way harder to get the thumbnail you want out of it. Owlboy is not interesting. Perfect Dark, I had iterations. This is an example of me having 2 different competing thumbnail ideas and ultimately getting to use both of them. See, get rid of that. Perfect Dark. That's the wrong song. Like, I think that was the... Oh yeah, Andrew's not in these thumbnails. I didn't do the 2 heads thing. Maybe I'll remaster these and add me and Andrew in the sidebar instead of the old setup. Like, this was the main series thumbnail. And this was the unabridged thumbnail. Let's get rid of this finale thing. There we go. What happened was, this is an example of me having multiple drafts for thumbnails and not being sure which one I wanted to go with. So like, do I want her... It would have looked like this originally. Alright. Like, I was tooling with this art, trying to figure out what to do with it. You can see that like, there's just text here because it's like a strategy guide or some shit, and I just overlapped it with like a straight blue bar that matches what was already there, and then put unabridged. But I was like, do I want her holding this gun like this as the thumbnail, or do I want just the face? Because they're both iconic-ish. Like, this is the character, but this is like the cover of the game. Like, the cartridge of the game had this image on it. But I had the issue where I had 2 different things going on, and like, this was like an entire unabridged series. Like, there's a lot of playthroughs where I have like a boss fight, then there's the unabridged version of that boss fight. But Perfect Dark, we were playing on a really high difficulty, and almost every level took like hours, and then I would edit it down to like a 20 or 30 minute video or something. And so there's 2 different versions of the entire playthrough for most of the missions, where you just see the unabridged version or the abridged version if you want to see like one edited for watchability versus one that's like the live stream experience sort of thing. But it's mostly just, but it was like partly just an excuse to get away with the fact that I had like 2 competing templates that I was trying to work with and that I was thinking of using at the time, and then ultimately found a way to use both of them by having them like be in parallel on their names. Let's see. I don't really have anything that jumps out to me right now. This is just one art asset with a logo over it, but you can see that I went through different versions. So I was like, do I want to use that one, or do I want to use like this guy over here? You can see like I had this like starting, like this is the image. Oh, let's get rid of the finale. Like this is an image that was available that has four main characters all on screen at once. Like that's a pretty good. I can maybe work with that. So let's just like iterate on that. Like let's do the auto adjust on the color, and like that gets rid of the weird brown that's over the screen and makes it like pop and visible. But then I'm like kind of like that's still kind of, they're kind of small and chaotic. Do I want to just fixate on these two people in particular? So I was thinking like let's make a thumbnail that just fixates on these two characters and frames them much better than it does these four people. Like this is kind of a better thumbnail. I might have like photoshopped him out of the frame and just made a generic background over here so that there's not awkwardly a guy sticking out of frame over there. But then I just decided to go with this one and then put the logo up here. So that became the thumbnail. That's a pretty neat looking one. I don't know, there's just a bunch of choices and stuff. It's fun. Like I like this part of my job. Except for when I have a deadline and I need to quickly come up with an idea of what to do next. But it's kind of a chance to do a different aspect of all this and get kind of creative. This is me trying to make something visible. She just like did not stand out in the original art. Like this was the original screenshot I used. These are added separately too. That's the logo, and then this is an image from the game that I used to fill in some negative space a little bit. But then it's like, fuck, she's so hard to see in that thumbnail. So it's like, let's give her a contrast change, and then give her a background, and then she stands out a bit better. I'm not in love with it. The color looks weird, so I could have still done better there. But it's a difference of standout than that, where she like blends in. Because you're fighting in a situation where like you have a sidebar full of like a dozen images that all look like this, that are all like competing for your attention, and you're trying to get people to come to your channel. Which is why you have a lot of YouTube thumbnails that look like what they do. Some of these are old. Some of these are very old. Wow. Because I've moved twice since I made this thumbnail. It's funny. Yeah, that was Lone Survivor. That game was neat. I beat the entire game on one live stream, with like nobody watching. But I just beat it in one sitting. And that was just the idea at the time. They all take different amounts of work. This is a fun detail that I don't know if people even noticed at the time. But see. They have Untitled Goose Game by House, and it's just all these people chasing the goose. And then there's me and Stephanie in the sidebar. The background of this art asset is just blue, so it's very easy to just fill the entire screen with blue, and then you can't tell where the borders are of different assets on the screen. They have a nice, easy logo for obvious reasons, so it's very easy to make this. But I did this with the final image. Is that this group of people is the same image as this group of people. It's just like right behind that fat guy at the end of that series of people is like these two people, or maybe the crowd might be bigger than that. But at the back of that crowd is these two people running and holding hands, and then the kid tripping and dropping his glasses. He's just like the last person in the chain of people chasing the goose. But because it's the finale where you win, it's like, the terror that is the goose. So I've zeroed in on that kid falling and the concern looking, and now it looks like they're all running from the goose. And I also made the goose bigger to be more threatening. And instead of Untitled Goose Game by House, in a similar font, I have it say Finale by Peace Was Never an Option, instead of by House. And it's just kind of nonsense. Dumb gags. Every now and then I will do something other than just make one thumbnail that goes forever. But you gotta feel inspired. You gotta have an idea. Otherwise, just shit goes the way it goes. I should probably cut this off. Yeah, there's nothing interesting there. That looks not good around there. This is an old one. This is a very old one. But a lot of these details are not visible at the given range. Wow, that's very low resolution Cao Cao.
remember having trouble with Dishonored. Yeah, I was not happy with this one. Doesn't look great. It's just kind of chaotic looking. It's not as bad as I remember, I guess, but it's not great. Like, that was the main playthrough of Dishonored, then there's the DLC with Dowd's story, which gave me much better art to work with. And then Dishonored 2. Nice clean thumbnail. I'm gonna go ahead and cut things off here, because I think I've gotten plenty long on the weird topic of thumbnails and so on. Blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I'm still waking up a little bit, perhaps. It's a busy week. I've got shit coming up. And a lot of multiplayer things I'm juggling around, because we're getting ready for the launch of the free-to-play remixed version of Final Fantasy XIV and so on, and coordinating with other people and so on and so forth. And things are going on. But I think I'm going to stop it there. So if you want to check out more videos where I just sit here and talk, I upload one pretty much every weekend to Patreon at patreon.com/SebastianSB. Link in the description to there. That's also where we support this entire channel. Right now, I'm playing Shadows... Sorry, goddamn, not Shadows of Mordor. Why am I thinking Shadows of Mordor? Right now, I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima because it was selected by Patreon. And that last one selected by Patreon was Phoenix Wright. And if you want to be involved in the process of choosing the next game when Ghost of Tsushima is over, then you want to hop on Patreon for that purpose too. $1 lets you vote, and also gives you access to these Q&A videos the rest of the time when they're all hidden behind the paywall. This is the only series that's currently behind a paywall because I want all the proper like Let's Plays to be not hidden behind the paywall. That's the idea. So it's coming up with ways to promote your Patreon while still trying to maintain the idea of the actual Let's Plays all being public, which is the core content of all the stuff you do, is an interesting thing to figure out how to strategize and all that. But it is how I do what I do. The majority of my income has historically been from the Patreon and not from YouTube ad revenue. And Patreon is the reason why I can do this full-time, despite having a relatively small channel that does niche behaviors where I sit here and play one game for dozens or hundreds of episodes and commit to beating things and don't like pander to trying to get kids to watch my stuff and so on. And, you know, whatever, with whatever my particular personality is and whatnot, if that's what you like, I get away with that because the people that like it support me on Patreon. Because it does not bring in the numbers, but it works for me, and it has been getting away with this. It feels like a crime. I've just been getting away with murder for like the last 4 years or so. But yeah, that's the basics. The votes for what game comes next comes whenever the current Patreon game gets finished. So when Ghost of Tsushima gets finished, I'll figure out when the finale is once it's edited, and then I'll be like, all right, here's the schedule leading up to the finale. So 3 days before the finale, there will be a vote, and 2 days before that vote will be the nominations, which is where the nominators choose what'll be on the vote, and so on. But when we're not doing votes and whatnot, although there was an additional vote recently where I was like, hey, me and Andrew just finished World of Warcraft. Should we do Final Fantasy XIV or Satisfactory next? And I let Patreon vote for that. And that determined the outcome, and it's currently Final Fantasy XIV. Sometimes I do little bonus things to try to fill the gap between the long gap there can be between the main votes. So sometimes I let them make additional choices when I'm kind of up in the air on something. But on the Patreon, you can send me a message on Patreon and ask me a question. And that can be answered in future episodes of this every weekend, where I'm usually hanging out and leveling a character in World of Warcraft, and I discuss whatever thing was brought up. So thanks for watching like always, guys, and I'll see you next time.